The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We're working on 3 of them right now, trade agreements. We're doing 3.
Historic trade deal inked, the trade solution with one of America's strongest allies, and a new American Pope now leading the faithful. Pope Leo XIV resume and plan for the future of the Catholic Church. And anti-Semitism erupts again on college campuses. The most recent protests on Columbia University as lawmakers grill leaders for change. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and look ahead with what to expect, starting with the newly elected leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV, delivering his first speech before the thousands of people gathered in St. Peter's Square and more than 1.4 billion Catholics around the world.
God loves everyone. Evil will not prevail. We are all in the hands of God.
And he says he wanted to continue the blessing the late Pope Francis gave Easter Sunday, one day before his death. The Catholic Church's leadership under Pope Leo is likely to continue the vision of the late Pope Francis. Pope Leo's priorities for the church will become clear soon enough, but his welcoming speech to St. Peter's Square gives us some hints. He told the faithful that they must walk united, seeking peace and justice, and to be missionaries to the world. He tells Catholics they must show charity, presence, and be in dialogue with love. When we look at the numbers, it was indeed a historic moment. 133 cardinal electors, the most ever, voted inside the Sistine Chapel to elect 65-year-old Cardinal Robert of Prevost as the 267th Pope. It took 4 rounds of voting for them to reach their decision, just 2 days after starting the conclave, making it one of the shortest. And a look at the White House now, where President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced the framework of a trade agreement this week. They say the terms will be mutually beneficial, but double-digit tariffs on British goods coming into the U.S. are expected to stay in place. This comes as President Donald Trump now says the U.S. should lower its 145% tariff on most Chinese goods to 80%. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports from Washington.
5 weeks after President Trump declared his Liberation Day with massive universal tariffs, he's announcing his first outline of a deal.
I'm thrilled to announce that we've reached a breakthrough trade deal with the United Kingdom.
This is going to boost trade between and across our countries.
The White House says the agreement should open up $5 billion worth of trading opportunities for U.S. exporters. A modest increase, given the U.S. exported $80 billion in goods to the U.K. last year, according to government data.
Increasing access for American beef, ethanol, and virtually all of the products produced by our great farmers. The final details are being written up in the coming weeks. We'll have it all very conclusive.
10% tariffs on British goods will stay in place. In order to give countries time to negotiate deals, the president says treat the U.S. fairly. So far, the White House has only reached this one framework with the U.K. And now they're changing their message on how important it is that they actually reach deals, going from this.
A lot of countries would come right to us and want a bargain. We've got 90 deals in 90 days, possibly pending.
To this.
When are you going to sign deals? We don't have to sign deals.
The president says other countries need the U.S. more than the U.S. needs them, and in a matter of weeks, he'll unilaterally set terms for trading partners. President Trump is not the only one with a say in how this trade war unfolds. On Thursday, the European Union revealed its plan to retaliate against the U.S. if a deal is not reached with the White House to reverse 20% tariffs on virtually all European items, plus another 25% on cars, steel, and aluminum, which the EU says violate the rules of the World Trade Organization. The Europeans are prepared to hit the U.S. with tariffs of their own on more than $100 billion worth of American products. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The Federal Reserve says interest rates are staying where they are for now at around 4.25%. The Fed cited risks of higher unemployment and inflation fears. The bank's primary focus is on keeping employment levels high as well as prices low. Aggressive tariffs threaten both efforts. Despite economic headwinds, Federal Reserve Chairman Powell says policymakers have some room to work with in determining where to go with rates.
For the time being, we're well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance.
Powell says President Trump's tariffs could put the Fed in a bind where Fed officials will have to make a decision about whether to focus on tackling higher prices with rate increases or dropping them to help the labor market. Dozens of anti-Israel activists taken into custody after an hours-long standoff at Columbia University. More than 100 activists stormed the college's library, pushing past security as students prepared for finals. The NYPD made at least 75 arrests after the university's president said she requested the help of officers to clear the building when protesters refused to leave despite being warned. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the federal government is reviewing the visa status of the trespassers and vandals who took over the library, adding that pro-Hamas thugs are no longer welcome in our great nation. This comes as America's elite universities have been the main stage for anti-Israel protests on college campuses. But a GOP-led House committee wants to show it's not just an issue for the Ivy League. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins.
Another crop of college presidents summoned to Capitol Hill to answer to reports of rampant anti-Semitism on their campuses.
The incidents we'll be discussing with our witnesses today are truly appalling and shameful.
Wednesday's hearing echoed similar ones held during the last Congress that resulted in the presidents of Harvard, Columbia, and UPenn handing in their resignations.
Calling for the genocide of Jews on Harvard's campus.
I can assure you we have robust
what actions have been taken? I'm not asking.
Actions underway.
This time, the leaders of Haverford, DePaul, and California Polytechnic sat in the hot seat.
This type of behavior will not be tolerated. This goes beyond the Ivy League or the elite colleges.
And for the most part, gave contrite, apologetic answers.
I am deeply sorry. I know there are areas where we must and will do better.
Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, though, pressing for specifics.
I am asking you, was there any disciplinary action taken?
Disciplinary action can include expulsion and...
I'm not asking what it can include. I'm asking, was it taken? Again, these university presidents who are former presidents fail to answer these direct questions.
Meanwhile, Democrats on the committee highly critical of the hearing's premise.
Instead of engaging with this topic genuinely and constructively, we have another performative hearing.
So was the legal expert called to testify, former ACLU legal director David Cole.
While such speech obviously causes deep harm, the greater danger is giving government officials the power to censor speech by labeling it anti-Semitic, racist, or sexist.
For the college presidents, it's not just their jobs on the line, but also federal funding to their university, something GOP lawmakers have already threatened if adequate changes are not made to address anti-Semitism. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins, reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
President Trump is floating the idea of giving moms a $5,000 baby bonus, an incentive aimed at boosting the country's declining birth rate, which has been falling since 2007. Emma Wither of the Fact Check team joining us now to discuss. So childcare alone is astronomical. What is the average cost of having a baby today?
Yeah, it's like three times what they're offering with this baby bonus. It's a lot of money. So on average, it costs families about $18,865 to give birth here in the U.S. That's all according to investors Investopedia. Now, even with insurance, families are still paying nearly $3,000 out of pocket under these large group health plans. So, yeah, it's a pretty penny.
Not cheap.
No.
Are birth rates that low to the point where the government needs to pay women to have children?
It definitely seems like a concern here. According to the CDC, birth rates in the U.S. went up just 1% in 2024. That's still hovering near record lows. And more than 3.6 million babies were born last year. The fertility rate, though, is now about 1.6 births per woman, far below the 2.1, which is needed to keep the population steady without needing immigration. So,
All right. Emma, thank you. Much more to this. Emma's going to be back in a few minutes with a look at other ways the Trump administration is hoping to encourage Americans to grow their families.
Still ahead, locker room controversy, growing concerns about an investigation of 3 young teen boys who raised concerns a biological girl was allowed to use their school's locker room in Northern Virginia. How the students' parents are responding.
I'm here to speak on behalf of my son, who has been wrongfully accused of a Title IX violation. In truth, he is the victim of a Title IX violation, ignored and unsupported by the very system that is supposed to protect him.
An exclusive update to the story we brought to you first. Another concerned parent says their son is being investigated by Loudoun County Public Schools in Northern Virginia for sexual harassment. This comes after 3 boys raised concerns over a biological girl being allowed to use a boys' locker room. The National News Desk, Nick Minot, reports.
Loudoun County Public Schools is investigating a Title IX complaint against 3 boys at Stonebridge High School who were uncomfortable with a female student using the boys' locker room. Today I spoke with the father of one of the boys. He did not want to show his face on camera to help protect his son's identity. Let me ask you this. Is your son uncomfortable with a girl in the boys' locker room?
Of course.
LCPS's policy allows students to use bathrooms and locker rooms based on gender identity, not biological sex. A policy this father wants changed. In March, a female student video recorded the boys having a conversation about how they were uncomfortable with a girl in the locker room. Did your son do anything wrong?
I do not believe, and I trust my son. He's honest. I do not think he did anything wrong at all.
This father is an immigrant to the United States, and his Muslim faith is important to him. Now he's thinking about leaving Loudoun County because of how his family is being treated by LCPS. The father says the accusations against his son are baseless, and the Title IX investigation should be dropped.
It looks to me like they're targeting the minority. He's thinking about dropping school. We're trying to say no, you didn't do anything wrong.
So this is having an impact on him.
Yes, it has a lot of impact.
Tuesday night, the mother of one of the boys spoke up at the Loudoun County School Board meeting, also urging the board to change course.
I'm here to speak on behalf of my son, who has been wrongfully accused of a Title IX violation. In truth, he is the victim of a Title IX violation, ignored and unsupported by the very system that is supposed to protect him.
I was the first to speak with the father of the 3rd boy being investigated, a 7 News exclusive that prompted Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin and Attorney General Jason Miyares to announce an investigation into LCPS's handling of this situation.
Even though they're the victims in this, somehow they're being treated as the perpetrators. I find that very, very curious. I think this is an example, yet again, of a school district that tries to be so open-minded, the brain falls out. The fact that it's 2025 and there are people that are advocating and pushing for members of the opposite sex to be in a teenager's locker room, and they think somehow that's being open-minded and tolerant.
And that was Nick Minot reporting. An attorney representing the boys' family says the school's gender policy violates state law and federal policy, where the real victims are the ones being punished. Seth Wolf, the father of one of the boys, joined our Jen Jeffcoat to discuss the developing situation.
To be clear, this investigation of your son began as a result of this biological girl recording your son's conversation with these 2 other teen boys in the locker room, talking amongst themselves, asking why there was a girl in the boys' locker room. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, that's correct. It was a conversation among his peers. It wasn't directed at anyone. and it was recorded in a private situation, private space.
So isn't that a violation of your son's privacy? What kinds of conversations has the school had with you regarding your son's rights?
Right now, I believe that the school district is not concerned with my son's rights. I sent a letter out to the administration and the school board about the videotaping, and they said it wasn't an invasion of his privacy because he wasn't in a compromised situation. So it's very confusing, very strange.
How did you find out? Did you get a letter from them? Did they contact you?
We found out when we got the official notice that the investigation was going to begin.
How has this impacted your son, your family, really your entire community?
My son's confused. He didn't believe that he's done anything wrong. It was just a normal conversation that he was having. They were feeling uncomfortable. I have a strong family, and they're all supportive. We're just trying to protect his rights, his privacy, and make sure that this doesn't follow him around for the rest of his life.
I want to read to you what Loudoun County Public Schools told Fox News Digital. They wrote, to be absolutely clear, Loudoun County Public Schools would not investigate or discipline students based on their personal opinions, thoughts, or beliefs, provided those expressions do not violate policies prohibiting hate speech, discriminatory language, threats, or other forms of harmful or disruptive conduct. However, LCPS does investigate and may take disciplinary action when student behavior violates LCPS's Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook for Families and Student Code of Conduct. What's your response to that?
I would say that the policies that Loudoun County have, they do, if I read through them, they are confusing and they leave a lot of gray area for interpretation. And so I think that's a slippery slope when we start to look at that. And I think that some of the policies, even with the privacy of somebody in the locker room, they're not being followed. So then it's a double standard. And I think they're trying to make an example of these kids.
Well, the statement went on to say that LCPS rejects any characterization that implies the schools are unsafe or fail to protect the rights of all students. However, at least one of Loudoun County's own school board members appears to be on your side. And I want to read to you what board member Deanna Griffith said. She sent a statement in response to our reporters' questions that we heard from earlier. She wrote, "What we are seeing and will continue to see are the consequences of policies that have introduced confusion and conflict into spaces that were once clear and safe, especially for young children. The truth is, many of these issues would have never arisen if we had upheld the basic principle that boys and girls are biologically different. LCPS students deserve their own private, secure spaces, particularly in bathrooms and locker rooms. Recognizing biological differences isn't discriminatory, it's common sense, and it's essential for protecting the dignity and safety of all children." Seth, we did hear from one of the boys' parents who said he might leave Loudoun County now because of the way his family was being treated by the school system. How do you feel about that, and what's your plan moving forward?
I think that's sad. Loudoun County is a great community. It's a beautiful place to live and to try to raise a family. It's just that these policies that they're creating, it does create an unsafe space and an unclear message, especially given the Virginia state and the federal guidelines. So we don't plan to go anywhere, but I'd love to see some policy change. I'd love to see these kids protected, not just for my kids, but for all the kids in the future in these safe spaces. I think that Loudoun County can make a plan that protects everybody that's involved.
All right, well, we appreciate you joining us here, Seth. We'll be following this story along with you and your family. Thanks for joining us.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, aggressive protesters at an event in Washington State, the alarming questions and remarks they made to people as they followed them outside a transgender athlete event. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From ICE arresting criminal illegal aliens in Nevada to a high-speed police chase in California. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start with activists causing chaos at an event hosted by women's sports advocate Riley Gaines in Washington State.
As the event let out, activists in black followed people to their cars.
You thought about killing yourselves today!
Telling them they hope they die in a crash and encouraging them to kill themselves.
What is that about? You're telling them you hope they die in a car crash? Why do that? I mean, why are you doing that?
I get you should think about killing yourself today. Have you thought about dying today?
The protesters, dressed in what's known as black bloc, were aggressive.
I'm just going to trust that the cops have our back.
It didn't keep people from showing up to hear Riley Gaines and Olivia Krolczyk, who advocate against allowing trans women to compete in female sports.
This is not anti-anyone. This is not anti-trans. This is pro-girls and pro-women. And, I'd go to war for any of my girls.
People can disagree on philosophy. That doesn't make them anti-anything. There needs to be a discussion of this.
plan right now is just to get an eye. We have a good spot for an eye. As soon as he leaves, he's supposed to leave around 6:20.
ICE officers zeroed in on a house in Carson City.
Try to get set up here at a location where we have a long eye so we can see what's going on. However, we'll be far enough away that we're not going to be seen.
Officers waited for about an hour when the suspect came out, but with a not ideal situation. Two older kids were in the car. Once he headed up Highway 50, officers made a traffic stop.
We just asked him to step out to the back of his vehicle so we didn't tell him in front of the children that upset them.
They arrested 56-year-old Rodolfo Hernandez Yanez from Mexico. ICE says he was in the country illegally, and then in 2014, he was convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
Is that him?
Matt Salinas says he was inside his business, a wake skate in Lindsay Tuesday afternoon, when he stepped outside to see what was going on.
We heard the sirens, and the next thing you know, it's just a red Silverado barreling down the street. We were kind of hiding, and the next thing you know, we just hear a huge crash. Honestly, it was a crazy situation. I felt like I was in a movie.
And as Tulare County Sheriff's deputies and Lindsay police swarmed the area,
innocent bystander popped out and kind of took down the guy. It was kind of crazy.
That bystander, Dustin Dunny.
I knocked him down, put him on the ground until the cops got there. I'm a real live human being that takes care of people.
Coming up next, we'll take a look at the stories making their rounds on our website, including a raccoon holding a suspicious item. How the little guy named Chewy, how police put his owner behind bars. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, the Walt Disney Company plans to debut a new theme park in Abu Dhabi. This will be their 7th global resort destination. A potential opening could be in the early 2030s. Also, the NFL draft is set to take place in Washington, D.C. in 2027. President Trump says the popular event will be held on the National Mall. NFL officials expect more than 1 million people to attend the 3-day event. Also, a raccoon holding a meth pipe. Police in Springfield Township, Ohio captured this video you're looking at right here while stopping a 55-year-old driver. She had an outstanding warrant and suspended driver's license. A body cam captured the raccoon named Chewy holding a meth pipe to its mouth. The driver was detained without incident. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Apple is looking into revamping its web browser Safari to be powered by artificial intelligence suggestions, veering away from Google search. An Apple executive disclosed the tech giant's plans during his testimony in the U.S. Justice Department's lawsuit against Google parent company Alphabet. It's over Apple and Alphabet's estimated $20 billion a year deal that makes Google the default search engine on Apple devices. This case could force the end of that long-standing partnership. Coming up next, transgender troops being forced out of the military. The Supreme Court order helping to make the purge possible. Also, attempting to end a Biden-era program. The president's latest push to prevent illegal migrants from living and working in the U.S. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Keeping men out of women's sports. I'm Jeff Harris in Washington. Coming up, the powerful testimony on Capitol Hill as lawmakers work to send a message to those who don't follow the rules.
And the FAA making major changes. The new upgrades coming to air traffic control systems that's expected to alleviate airport problems. And Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial underway. A legal expert breaks down the jury selection process as opening statements near. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for being here this weekend. Keeping men out of women's sports. The DOJ subcommittee holding a hearing on that topic this week, including testimony from two female athletes calling for greater protections for biological women in sports. The hearing over 3 hours long with many heated exchanges. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has more.
There were many heated exchanges between lawmakers, but what really stood out was the testimony from two female athletes, Stephanie Turner and Peyton McNabb, both with direct experience competing against transgender opponents.
The DOJ subcommittee meeting on Wednesday to hear testimony on transgender participation in women's sports.
Why is this happening when we have federal laws on the books intended to foster women's sports?
Among those testifying, Stephanie Turner, who went viral after taking a knee during a fencing competition, protesting having to compete against a transgender opponent.
That knee I took in protest was a cry for help and an act of desperation.
Also Peyton McNabb, former volleyball player who sustained a traumatic brain injury in a game against a transgender player.
I went into this game knowing that there was a male opponent, but I felt helpless and had no idea what to do.
Now the hearing comes just days after activists protested speeches by former swimmer and activist Riley Gaines, sharing how she believes transgender women shouldn't play on women's sports teams.
A less than average male swimmer competing at the Division I level in his rightful category, the men's category, ranking in the 400s and 500s nationally the year prior to then just 12 months later dominating.
Along with testimony, Wednesday's hearing also featured some sparring between parties. Democratic Representative Melanie Stansberry questioning the hearing's purpose.
Now, fencing hearings fall under Department of Government Efficiency?
Okay, this is the rule book right here, Ms. Stansbury. I'm sure you have a copy of it.
Now, USA Fencing Board Chair Damian Lafelt also grilled by lawmakers on Wednesday. Representative Green saying USA Fencing is making a mockery out of women's fencing by allowing biological males to compete. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
And happening now, the Pentagon says it will immediately begin removing as many as 1,000 transgender troops from the military. The Defense Department says other service members will be given 30 days to self-identify, backed by Tuesday's Supreme Court decision, which allowed the Trump administration to enforce the ban on transgender military members. The department says it will go through medical records to identify others who haven't come forward. And the Trump administration is asking asking the Supreme Court to allow it to end a Biden-era program that permitted migrants from troubled countries to temporarily live and work in the U.S. It's part of an emergency appeal against a lower court order keeping in place temporary legal status for 500,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The order says the Department of Homeland Security does not have the authority to revoke the protections without providing individualized case-by-case reviews. The White House claims the court overstepped its authority. And new information, the U.S. air traffic control system getting a major makeover. Here, President Trump announcing a new plan over the phone at an air traffic control conference.
These actions will bring American air traffic control into the highest level of anybody, any country, anywhere in the world, the highest in the 21st century.
The Transportation Department's plan to overhaul the system is an aggressive one. 6 new air traffic control centers and technology and communications upgrades at all air traffic facilities, all in 3 years' time. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says fiber, wireless, and satellite technology will be added to more than 4,600 locations and 600 radars will be replaced. Airline execs love it.
The biggest thing that we can do for the air traffic controllers is get them technology that works and get them fully staffed. And that's why today is such a historic day, I think, for the FAA, because for the first time in my career, we actually have a plan to get this fixed.
The Trump administration says the overhaul is necessary in the wake of recent deadly plane crashes, near misses, and technical failures. New developments, the Army is pausing helicopter flights near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. It comes after 2 commercial planes had to abort landings last week to keep them away from a Black Hawk helicopter flying to the Pentagon. In January, a Black Hawk helicopter from the same unit collided with a passenger jet near the airport, killing 67 people. Now to hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial. Final jury selections are on hold in New York City this week. Attorneys from each side are expected to pick a panel of 12 jurors and 6 alternates from a pool of 45 qualified perspectives. Earlier this week, I sat down with attorney and legal analyst Jana Spilbor for a look at how this trial could pan out. First of all, how likely is it that teams will be able to find an unbiased jury that's never heard of Diddy?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Although I'll tell you, the last person you want on the jury is someone who's never heard of him, right? Because if they haven't heard of P. Diddy, what rock have they been living under? But what you do want is to find people who don't have a preconceived bias against these very salacious issues. Look, there's sex trafficking. There are sex crimes alleged here. You could easily have people in the jury, potential jury pool, who have very strong opinions about that. People who perhaps supported the Me Too movement, for example. You will never get a jury that doesn't include women, and women are the victims in this case.
Many have seen, Jana, the surveillance video of Diddy and his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, that clearly speaks for itself. We do want to show some of it now, but we do want to warn some viewers may find it disturbing. As you know, Jana, he did apologize after this video came out. I'm wondering how significant A, issuing that apology is, and B, how significant this piece of evidence will be, do you think?
This piece of evidence, to me, is the most damaging for the defense. And it's interesting because he's not charged in this case with beating up his girlfriend. I wish he had been back then when it happened, but that statute of limitations has run. Here's why it's going to hurt him the most. Diddy's defense is basically that all of these freak-offs, all of these things, the allegations against him, were done consensually. But when you look at this video with Cassie Ventura trying to get away from this man and him running out in a towel and beating her up in a public hotel hallway, there's nothing consensual about that.
As you mentioned, I believe obviously the defense will try to go after this as from a consent standpoint, but how challenging is it going to be for prosecutors to prove that Diddy was running a racketeering enterprise?
Yeah, now here's where the defense might actually make some points. It's odd to charge this sort of behavior under RICO, right? Because think about it. If they're alleging that he was running a criminal enterprise, number one, there is nobody else at the defense table. They didn't charge any of his assistants or what have you, employees, with being part of this racketeering enterprise.
We appreciate your expertise. As always, important to stress, Diddy has pleaded not guilty to all of these charges. Jonna Spilbor, thank you for joining us. We'll be in touch. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, will be live at the courthouse next week. Be sure to tune in starting Monday morning at 7 and online at thenationaldesk.com. On Capitol Hill, Republicans plan to use their majorities in a special legislative maneuver called budget reconciliation to bypass the traditional lawmaking process in Democratic opposition in order to pass parts of President Trump's agenda. Republicans put themselves on a tight timeline to get it done, but they are struggling to agree on some key items. If there is a marquee item in what they're calling this big, beautiful bill, it is an extension of Trump's 2017 tax plan, but absolutely nothing is final yet as committees are still working through the details. And many moderate Republicans show uneasiness about potential areas like cuts like Medicaid, food assistance, and state and local tax deductions. Democrats' votes won't be enough to block the bill, so they are trying to convince persuadable Republicans to oppose it.
We will use every procedural tool in our power next week to hold them in that committee room as long as possible to convince them to walk away from what will be deadly health care cuts.
The House is marching down the field. We're going to deliver our part of this, I think, in a timely manner, and I think then the Senate will take our work and will use it as the basis for their work.
And House Speaker Johnson says he can get this past the House by Memorial Day. Then there's a whole new battle in the Senate, which has stricter rules about what can be included in a reconciliation package. President Trump is backing a $5,000 baby bonus for moms, part of a broader push to boost the country's lagging birth rate. The Fact Check team's Emma Withrow joining us to discuss, and it's not just about money. The Trump administration, I understand, is also looking into education programs as well.
Yeah, that's a whole other piece to it. So the New York Times, they reported that the White House is considering government-funded programs to teach women about their menstrual cycles so they can understand more clearly when they're ovulating and whether they're able to conceive. There's also another proposal that would set aside 30% of Fulbright scholarships, which is a big international exchange program, specifically for applicants who are married or have children.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I know that you also looked at polling about why some adults are simply just, not interested in having a child. What's driving that?
Yeah, it's difficult to pin down. I'm sure everyone has their own reasons, but the Pew Research Center, they found that about a third of adults 50 and older who don't have kids just say they never wanted them. Pretty simple there. Other common reasons are not finding the right partner, wanting to focus more on their career, hobbies, or other life goals.
All right, an interesting chart there. Emma, thank you. Dee. If you want a closer look and for more on this Fact Check team topic, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. And still to come here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from Trump's tariff plan to anti-Semitism continuing on college campuses.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump's tariffs still a major topic among investors, consumers, and lawmakers here in D.C. National correspondent Audra Elnishar, you were at the Capitol this week talking to members of both parties about tariffs. What did they tell you?
Well, look, all lawmakers, Democratic, Republican, and everyone in between, agrees that free trade policies over the last few decades have overall hurt American manufacturing, and that tariffs can be a tool to help onshore jobs. But of course, Democrats are saying the way President Trump is using them will be economically, financially catastrophic for Americans. Republicans, for the most part, are acknowledging this short-term pain, or transition period, as President Trump is calling it, but they are sticking with the president, at least in public, saying that trust in the president, his strategy will work out. He's a master deal maker, as they say. But in talking to some of these Republicans, they are starting to slowly acknowledge that pain is really being felt by their small businesses in their home districts. Take a listen to what one congressman, a Republican from Tennessee, told me.
Very concerned about our small businesses and how this impacts them. There's a lot of work that has to be done. There will be some uncertainty as that happens when you give another country an advantage and then you try to take it away. It's kind of like giving my 4-year-old some candy and then trying to take it away from them.
So uncertainty is the name of the game on Wall Street and Main Street. Big firms, big companies like Apple, they're able to absorb more of that uncertainty and that shock than your mom and pop shop down the street is. So every day that this trade war goes on, that uncertainty has real life effects on balance sheets, on incomes, on prices on the shelf. But when you ask President Trump about the impact of these tariffs, both on small businesses, but also on inflation, he says really that there is nothing to worry about yet. So the question is, when or if will Republicans confront the president about this? Because remember, the midterms really aren't that far away, a year and a half or so, and this is going to be a real issue.
Absolutely. National correspondent Audra Elishar, thanks. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's deportation policies continue to cause controversy. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, you were in the Oval Office and asked President Trump about a new incentive they're offering to illegal migrants. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Steve, it was a question that got a long and animated answer. The president, of course, likes to talk about his immigration policy. It's something that continues to get him a decent amount of support in the polls, at least, while the Trump administration is continuing this sort of aggressive enforcement effort, arresting people. The numbers are still not adding up for the president. So what he is doing is he's asking as many people as possible to, quote, self-deport. It seems kind of crazy. We actually do have some reporting that people are doing it, or even paying the smugglers who got them here to take them back. But what he is offering is $1,000 plus, and these are his words, not mine, a beautiful flight back from where they came. So they're really trying to make it easy, and they're trying to get it so more and more people who do this, they think that if more people do this on their own, that they will maybe start to get the numbers that they're looking for. And here's what the president said for those who don't self-deport.
If they miss that limit, they're going to be taken out of our country, and they will never get a path to come back in, and it'll be a much tougher process.
We should mention, of course, that even if people do self-deport, there's a lot of people who don't actually trust that they will have any sort of easy pathway back in. As we know, getting back into the country is not only a very lengthy and complicated process, it's a costly one as well.
Absolutely. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, thanks. And anti-Semitism on college campuses was the focus of a congressional hearing this past week. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, this issue has mainly been focused on Ivy League schools, but now Republicans are looking beyond those universities.
Yeah, Steve, and that's what this hearing this past week was all about. So we saw the presidents of Haverford, of California Polytechnic, and of DePaul University on Capitol Hill in those hot seats getting very similar grillings to what we saw years ago from the first rounds of these hearings, where they had Harvard, UPenn, Columbia, and, you know, the big Ivy League schools that really make a lot of the headlines when it comes to reported anti-Semitism issues on campus. Now, I spoke with Representative Lisa McClain about why they focus on these specific schools. Here's what she had to say.
This type of behavior will not be tolerated. This goes beyond the Ivy League or the elite colleges.
So you could hear there, Steve, that the purpose of this hearing was for Republicans to show what they see as the breadth of this issue. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik made headlines in the first go around by really drilling in at the presidents of Harvard and the president of UPenn. Stefanik putting on the same performance this past time, really getting into specifics, wanting specific answers from these university presidents who, for the most part, were very contrite, who, for the most part, it did acknowledge that there are problems like this on campus. So there was a lot of apologizing and of saying sorry, but they were shorter on specifics than some of the congressmen would like. Now, for the Democrats on the committee, they just disagree with the whole premise of these hearings, calling them performative, saying they're not actually addressing the issue at hand. And then a legal expert was brought in as well. And he said the bigger issue here Is the government censoring speech under the guise of calling it anti-Semitism or calling it racist? And it's a slippery slope. Republicans, of course, then argue that this isn't about speech, this is about safety. But Steve, I think this issue is far from over.
Kayla, Christine, Audra, excellent work as always. Thank you for your hard work. Back to you.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, a luxury yacht stolen in Miami. A look at what led police on the chase down the Intracoastal Waterway and the man they say is behind the crime. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Baltimore, Maryland, where a doctor is dealing with a string of thefts he's taking very personally.
The person got out of the car, ran back here, cut the flag down, and ran back in the car with the flag.
For Dr. John Parkerson,
it didn't take long.
It's frighteningly familiar.
They just pulled up.
When he pulled into his Falls Road office this morning, Parkerson discovered his Israeli flag had vanished. All other flags were left intact. It wasn't until he looked at surveillance footage that he learned the whole story. At 1:30 Sunday morning, a thief carrying a knife and wearing a mask jumped out of a car and began slashing the flag. The thief and the flag rode away in a dark vehicle and haven't been seen since.
It looked like it was very planned out, deliberate.
And it looked very much like the scene that's played out 5 separate times now outside Parkerson's office. Until now, Parkerson thought he was being targeted by the same thief over and over and over again. But in this latest case, he suspects the thief is likely a woman on a similar mission.
The person was covered so you couldn't identify him. And yeah, who carries around a knife like that?
Whatever the case, it appears to be one of an exploding number of hate crimes in Maryland. Crimes that grew 211% last year compared to the year before.
Stop it. Respect my property. If you have a difference of opinion, fine. That's great. But don't destroy my property. And just let me be.
In Cincinnati, Ohio, a man is accused of killing his young neighbor after a confrontation regarding bullying. Police say 38-year-old Dominic Elahi shot his 18-year-old neighbor, which Elahi's attorney claims was in self-defense. Then, during his plea, a brawl broke out in the middle of the courtroom. Authorities evacuated the courthouse. Elahi's bond is now set at $1 million. And in Hobe Sound, Florida, the Martin County Sheriff's Office has identified a man accused of stealing a luxury yacht. Authorities say Nikolai Vilkov, a Russian national, led them on a chase down the Intracoastal Waterway.
This is so bizarre to have a yacht stolen in broad daylight. We're trying to figure out where he came from, what was he doing, what was he planning to do with the vessel. But there's a lot of questions we have.
Authorities say the chase lasted about an hour and a half before Vilkov was apprehended. Still ahead, changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. The House bill that could push the change across all federal agencies. The country is now one step closer to officially calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. The House passed a bill to make it permanent. If passed, the change would apply to law, map regulations, and other records. Trump said in January that the body of water was an integral part of the U.S. and its economy. Each federal agency would have 180 days to make the update. And Bill Gates is now speeding up his timeline to give away his massive amount of wealth. The longtime philanthropist announced that he wants to donate most of his $200 billion fortune within 20 years. Gates plans to close his foundation by the end of 2045. He originally planned to have the Gates Foundation continue to hand out funds after his death. Gates said in a post he wants his money to go towards improving global health and equity initiatives. This year's Kentucky Derby winner, Sovereignty, will not run in the Preakness Stakes. It means there won't be a Triple Crown champion now for the 7th straight year. Sovereignty's trainer told Preakness officials they plan on entering in the Belmont Stakes, which is the 3rd jewel of the Triple Crown, on June 7th in upstate New York. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. From all of us here, a very happy Mother's Day. Have a great week.